Hey friends, Donna Amidon here. We are right in the middle of a series called 9 Qualities to Help You Reach Your World. And in the studio we have Alex. He is one of the spiritual fitness coaches and he has talked about adaptability. And so we're just going to dive right in. I remember, Alex, in your teaching, you talked about how it is important as we talk to people who do not know Jesus to know their background and be adaptable in learning about them. Can you kind of expound on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because people come from different backgrounds, right? Whether it's culturally or how they grew up and their experience of the church or specifically Jesus himself.
Yep.
And so as you consider different people's backgrounds and as you're having conversations with them, some of the best things you can do is actually ask them questions.
Great.
That way you're learning about their background and you're getting to know, hey, do they potentially have some church hurt? Because those are conversations that maybe you can step into and offer up actually saying I'm sorry for different pain that you might have experienced through the church.
Yeah.
And you can step into then actually showing how Jesus continues to restore and step into forgiveness and even offer us like something much more beautiful than sin, but actually like the great love of Christ.
Yeah. Alex, I'm so glad you brought that up because when I talk to people and when I have other friends who've also tried to share their faith, church hurt is everywhere. It's almost like a buzzword. I mean, we didn't hear that 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, let's say we have that conversation. That person says, well, the church did this to me and I'm never going back to church and Christians are hypocrites. Like, how do you even respond effectively to that kind of narrative?
Yeah, you know, the scriptures tell us to weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to weep and to mourn with people who have experienced great hurt. So as you step into some of those conversations, I would encourage people to step in with great empathy, to listen.
Yeah.
More than try to fix them.
Perfect.
Because we're not the ones who does the fixing or the healing. That's the role of the Spirit of God. What he uses us for as ambassadors, as we're being adaptable kind of in these moments, is to step in and to be a listening ear, but then even to be able to show them that our sin, we all are hypocrites, we're all broken, we all make mistakes, and that's why we look ultimately to a holy, good God who is so much greater than we are. And so then we can point them back to Jesus himself, rather than saying, hey, some church or my church or any church or person or leader is going to be what solves your problem, because it's not. Jesus ultimately will. So I think the two pieces of advice that I would give people who are engaging in some of these conversations are listen rather than fix, and then point them to Jesus, not a person, leader, or a building or body of people.
I love that answer. I mean, people do not want to lecture. They want people to listen to them. And I think particularly in this generation, people want to share their souls. And if they do, they're entrusting us.
Yeah.
And so we need to really handle that with care because, people do have painful church experiences, but that doesn't have to be the end of their story.
Yes.
That can just be part of their story.
Yes.
That's awesome. Now, I know that you are a pastor yourself, so you are dealing with people in the church every day. You've been a pastor how long?
5 years.
5 years. All right. So you've probably experienced a little bit of adaptability in just transitions. You're a dad of 2. And so tell us, how has adaptability been in your life personally as you've navigated being a pastor?
Yeah, well, our church planted March 1st of 2020. 2 weeks later, our city kind of had to shut down in a lot of different ways. So I had to learn how to be a pastor online. It was crazy. So that was an experience in and of itself. But as stuff started getting together and I was leading staff, a couple of different things that I started to realize was I could not lead people the way that I liked to be led. Because a huge piece of understanding leading a staff team is understanding that they're different people. They have different skill sets, they have different giftings, they're motivated in different ways. And so as I was just considering leadership within the church and leading people who are then going to lead more people, a big piece that I had to learn was to be able to be adaptable in how I lead one staff member to the other staff member. At the same time, with leading a church as a young pastor, we had several members who were in our church who were older than me. The majority of our church, actually, when we started, was all older than me and in a different stage of life. So I had to learn how to be adaptable, to encourage and speak to people who were older and in different stages, while at the same time, we're reaching and seeing newer, younger people kind of come into our church and being able to pour out to them as well, all at the same time. And the advice, encouragement, the scriptures that you're using to invest in these people was just changing with the different demographics demographic that I was working with as well.
Goodness, I cannot imagine beginning a church March of 2020.
Yep.
And now you probably had online, now you're in a building, and
Yeah.
that's took some adaptability, and you
Yes.
had kids in the middle of that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, adaptability is the word, and I love that word, but really what it boils down to is just being sensitive to what the Spirit is doing. Because a lot of times we get something fixed in our head, it's going to look this way, but we have to pivot and just follow what the Spirit's doing, and that is really adaptability.
Yes.
Well, I have one final question for you, and it's really just about each of us as we feel a little timid to share the gospel. We don't want to break friendships. We don't want to come across overbearing or awkward. But do you have any just little practical tips or any encouragements you could give our friends watching about just getting out there and sharing our faith?
Yeah, I think the first thing is actually something you just did. Being aware of what your fear is. Is it that maybe you feel like you don't know enough? Is it that you don't want to offend or hurt somebody? Is it that you want to keep a relationship? Oftentimes when we evaluate specifically what is it that's keeping us from sharing the gospel, is it something we believe about ourselves? Ultimately, like sharing the gospel is actually about the other person. It's about our great love for them and God's great love for them. So as you're kind of wrestling with some of those things, they're real. If you feel like you're unequipped, I would challenge you to then go find someone who could equip you and train you, and then challenge you to go along with them. If you're feeling like you don't want to offend somebody, actually pray that the Spirit would give you wisdom and grace as you're interacting, so that you would go about it peaceably, and that you would continue to have great love with them, and that God would continue the relationship, because oftentimes evangelism is much more than just one conversation.
It is, yeah.
And you want to keep the relationship so that you can continue to love them and share Christ with them. So I think the biggest piece of advice with some fear behind it is, hey, can you name it? What specifically is it? And then ultimately, finally, trusting that the work to save that person is not on your hands. We get to be ambassadors for Christ. We get to proclaim the message. He's the one that changes the hearts. He's the one who gives them a new heart, a new transformation, a new creation. Jesus is the one that does the work, and we get to joyfully be along for the ride and know that it's on His shoulders.
That's beautiful. I've never really even thought about that, to be honest. We have the fear, and we just kind of put fear in this very broad term, but there is probably something very specific that it is. And so God hasn't given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind.
Yes.
Identify what it is. I always say when I'm teaching, you got to name it to tame it. So you got to name what that thing is, and then you have to tame it and get it under the authority of God's word, so that you can go out there and share.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
Thank you, Alex, for sharing. You have so much wisdom, I can tell. I'm sure your church is very blessed to have you in leadership. So continue doing what you're doing.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed this so much. We hope you have too. And so we will see you next time. God bless.